And I'm super excited to introduce the next couple, Gundy and Lisa Anderson from Bog Roy Station in New Zealand. I got to know them about 5 years ago for the first time when I travelled over to New Zealand doing a bit of work in the lamb survival area, a little passion of mine and certainly one that this couple share a lot as well. Bog Roy Station is in the South Island, middle of the South Island of New Zealand, near Omarama. They run about 8,500 stock units, and they have a blend of the sort of country that we're envious of, the beautiful flats, about a third of that, a third roll of rolling country, and a third of the really steep stuff. So I'm hoping to see some pretty nice scenery, of course. But, you'll see in the briefing that I think Gundy, you'll outline probably half a dozen years or so ago, they started getting super focused on reproduction rates in their merinos, and they've gone from around 100% marking rate to over 130. I was keen to get you here to tell you our story. We always have challenges in this country putting a merino grower on the stand because which camper you're in and who do you get your rams from and all the rest of the discussion. This is firmly focused on what this couple do on their farm. And a big part of what they did was look in the mirror and work out what they could do better, as well as reaching out and being part of on-farm research and things like that. And part of that was getting an award a couple of years ago where he went to South Africa, and his conclusion from that trip was, it's absolutely confirmed the belief that we had not realised the full potential of our merino flock. So this is someone that's gone from 100 to 130 and thinks there's further to go. So that's part of the story, and they're doing it on a significant scale. So Gundy and Lisa Anderson, let's have a great discussion about your farming experience. Thank you. You got one each, or you just want to share? One each. Oh, you got one each?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, I think we better have one each. There's equality in this modern day and age.
Go for it, mate.
Thanks for that intro, Trumpy, and also good morning to everyone, and thanks for having us come along here. The reason we're here is because, as Jason said, he's been and visited home, and also Charlie DeFagley came and visited home not so long ago through a contact of a mutual friend we have. And when we got asked to come over, we said, well, what would you like to speak on? And obviously it was, a bit about the merinos and what we're doing, but Charlie just said, well, tell them like you told us at the kitchen table. So that's why we've got a couple of stools here, so we could, it's not because we're incredibly tired, it's just to try and replicate that a wee bit. I was looking for a kitchen table and a cup of coffee as well, but the props department kind of reneged on that a wee bit. And but we really wanted to sincerely talk to you as a farmer to a farmer. We mightn't have as polished a presentation or whatever, but we don't profess to come across like we have all the solutions and how clever we are or how great a job we're doing. But we're definitely prepared to share our story because we've been extremely grateful for other people who've shared their story with us. So anyway, we'll tell you a wee bit about ourselves.
He said. We farm Bog Roy. It's located in about the middle of the South Island in New Zealand. We're about an hour south of Mount Cook. And we have on average about 420 rainfall. So we do empathise with you guys that are going through the dry. We pretty much the same. We range from 300 to just over 1,000 metres above sea level. And we have 2 little children, and we're trying to make it work. We took over the farm from Gundy's family about 14 years ago, and yes, farm succession and the likes of. We'll get into it.
Just a wee bit about where we came from. Our old system, which would be, when I talk about the old system, is kind of talking about 14, 15 years ago probably. We were largely set stock, so we had just, it's pretty self-explanatory, but we pretty much had the ewes lived on their certain block. So many ewes stayed on this block, they went through their whole year through there, and possibly those blocks might have got a little bit of a break in March, which was about precisely when we grow nothing, so really it made us feel good, but the country didn't really get a bit of a spell. This led to us pretty much constant grass chasing, and I remember early on in our married life coming in and talking to Lisa over the kitchen table and saying, I'm just gut sick of this. I just can't find any grass and can't get ahead of things. You always felt like you were behind the 8 ball and just reacting, and nothing was going right. Whenever we got a rain, it just seemed like the hill country didn't react. And the reason I talk about the hill country so much is because that's our predominantly dryland country and the engine room of the ewe production at that stage, definitely. We're also had to be budgeting on, and more often than not, we're lining up for a 100-day winter of supplementary feeding, and this was getting more and more expensive. I remember a group of us did a bit of an analysis on the cost at one stage, which is quite a long time ago, and it was about $15 to get through the winter, and now it's pretty much near enough cost you a fleece for the winter. So if you're talking about a growing hogget or whatever, so everything with the price of diesel, etc., getting it made, and when I talk about supplements, that's barley, but also silage and baleage and hay and the likes, was getting more and more expensive. And when we sat back and had a look at it, we were actually perfectly misaligned to our with our peak demand and feed supply. So we had all our lamb drop would pretty much cart through the winter because they weren't up to slaughterable weights before our winter, and then we started killing them roughly in September, October, November. We also had ewes in peak lactation lambing about the 20th of September. We start lambing, so they were starting to come into peak lactation. That was about just when we started growing grass. And then when we just started really growing grass about the end of November, we started slaughtering all these lambs and getting them off the farm. So I was lessening the stocking rate then, and you'd say, well, that's pretty good. That's sweet, because then you've got all this tucker for these lambs at foot. But instead of giving them some better feed, we frantically closed that up because we needed to make that into supplements to carry on to get through the winter, to do another 100 days through the winter. In other words, we're like the wee, what are those little hamsters on the wheel, going faster and faster, and we didn't have time to look sideways because we were going that bloody fast trying to keep up with the wheel. And amongst all this, I took over, we went through family farm succession, which can not only took on quite a reasonable mortgage, but also it had a wee bit of pain associated with it, which I think some of you going through it or looking at going through it realise that on a real personal level, which is kind of hard to talk about, but it's the truth. And often that personal side of things will take more of a toll than the actual financial side of it. And so we had that involved then. Right at that stage too, we also started in on the process of renewing an irrigation consent. And you'd think, well, that sounds like a bit of a nothing. At the stage when our irrigation consent came up for renewal, it cost about $500 to renew, but that rapidly escalated. But we'll touch on that a bit later on. So this led us to the conclusion, we were pretty much flogging a dead horse. But it was a bit like one of those dramatic scenes in a hospital sitcom. When we had a close listen, the horse still had a wee bit of a heartbeat. And we thought there was a bit of hope. And it was actually a nice horse, but possibly the rider had just ridden it a bit bloody hard and hadn't given it a rest. So that made us came to the time when we reflected on ourselves.
So we did. We stopped and we actually stepped right back from the business. And Tromfie touched on it, but we really sat and looked in the mirror and thought, right, obviously this isn't sustainable. We're going to have to do something about it. So we analysed the property and we analysed ourselves, and so we sat and did a good old SWOT analysis that was from my previous jobs, and a bit of a geek. And so we looked at the property and we looked at its strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, and we listed everything that we could think of. We just brain dumped. And then we turned around and we asked ourselves the question of, would we actually employ ourselves? Like, were we intelligent enough to actually run this space? You know, you're talking about $1 million business. And we decided, okay, yep, we think we might be able to give it a crack. A few areas that we need a bit of tidying up on, but we'll have to educate ourselves on those. And then we really asked the hard questions, is did we even want to be there? Was it a community that we liked? Were we up for the challenge? And did we think we could make this work? And because it was going to be quite a hard journey. So yeah, we decided, yes, we wanted to stay there. And yes, we thought we'd have a crack at making it work.
We also, in that process, decided that we felt that the merinos were the best fit for the property, and also we needed to decide on what the best plant for the property was, and those sorts. So getting into that detail, but we really could only get into that detail once we'd really just stepped way back, like Lisa said, and reflected. Do we even want to be here? And once the answer was yes, then we started drilling into the detail.
And we did. So yeah, we essentially just cleared the head, got rid of the white noise as such. So from that SWOT analysis, we went through and we crossed off anything that we didn't feel we had any influence over. Just the old circle of influence. We nutted down to what the factors were that we had some control over. And it actually made things a hell of a lot easier going forward with decision making. So we also recognised that we needed to farm to our environment. We live in a really fragile environment. We've got really fragile soils, only 420 mil rainfall. We know every winter we don't grow any grass for about 3 months. Our ground is frozen for a couple of those months. So we just know that we have to get down to minimal stocking rate. It costs us to carry our stock through the winter. We also know that we're probably going to get dry in the summer. It gets bloody dry. So we had to factor in, we have to identify plants that are going to handle this, and we have to change our grazing management to also handle that. So they were areas we realised we had to upskill what kind of plants, how we were going to graze them, where we were going to grow them, and we also recognised that with the mortgage we had in place, the current stock production and performance wasn't paying the bills. Just due to the nature of where we live, it's a bit of a high-cost system, so we had to look at increasing the used production.
And a bit like old Homer here, once we'd done that, it really did, like Lisa said, decluttered things. It was a bit like sieving, like a big dirt sieve. I don't know if you use them and you sieve away, get all that dirt gone, and hello, you're left with a few stones there. Instead of a problem, they're actually the nuggets you want to pick up and put in your pocket and run forward with, because all the rest of the stuff you can't do anything about anyway. And it feels bloody good once you do that. It really was. I was a bit sceptical about it. I had to be explained what a SWOT analysis was. But and we actually did sit down with that bit of paper and physically write everything down and then cross it all off. But it felt really good once that had been done and just cleared away a whole lot of clutter we had no influence over.
So we made a start, and the first thing we targeted was what we were going to grow and where we were going to grow it. We identified that lucerne, just due to the nature of our soils and our climate, was going to be the best legume. We realised we needed to get legumes into the system to increase the protein content for the stock. And we, in a previous job, I used to be the R&D manager for Merino Inc. So I used to have a lot of worked with a gentleman, some of you might be familiar with, Dr. Derek Moot. In New Zealand, he's well known for being the expert in lucerne. And Gundy was asking, God, because we already had some lucerne in, but we were using it under the traditional cut and carry method. So it was always just, as Gundy mentioned, shut up and made for hay. But we'd read that there were people elsewhere in the country grazing their lucerne and getting good production from the ewes. So Gundy's going, how do we do this? How do we start with this? So I just gave him Derek's number, and then you gave him a call.
Yeah, so when I picked up the phone and talked to Derek, I've heard about grazing this bit of a lucerne, and it seems so simple now when you look back at it, but tradition's a heck of a thing because it hangs over you, and you don't kind of often think outside the square or on something so simple. But anyway, he said, right, what have you got there? And I said, well, we've got 3 paddocks here. And he said, well, whack them up and split them in half and get your 6 paddocks. And he just set out the basic rules, which are really, really easy to follow. And both don't graze more than 10 days, etc. Don't turn to a paddock before 30 days on your rotation and things like that. So we just simply got one mob of ewes, which that bottom right-hand picture is the first mob of ewes that started. We just let them in to graze the lucerne, went round and round. And a simple story, it just worked. There was better weight gains, the lands were a whole lot better, and the ewes were a whole lot better conditioned at weaning. So we knew we're pretty much on the right track there, and now let's just replicate it out through the property.
And Gundy touched on it. Traditionally in New Zealand it is always used for cut and carry, and we got the odd phone call from concerned people and neighbours driving past the road thinking we left the gate open and our ewes were on the lucerne. So we started the journey of what we refer to as landscape farming.
Yeah, there was another, the mutual friend that Charlie and ourselves have is Doug Avery, who's in the top of the South Island, and we got to hear about him through Derek Moot and heard how he'd turned around his dryland operation and through the extensive use of lucerne. And also had overcome a fair amount of adversity doing that. He wasn't a guy who was just getting along, pretty fat and happy, very profitable, and decided he'd give lucerne a go. He was coming out of a hole. And we felt like we were in a bit of a hole then as well, and so it struck a chord with us, and we've talked, obviously in touch with them quite a bit. But anyway, we adopted the landscape farming, as it's called, and the reason we do this in our country, it's quite rolling, and in the gullies we might have, say, a couple of foot of topsoil, but then it very rapidly will recede to maybe an inch if you're lucky when you get up onto the ridgelines. But the beauty with this is, now when we lamb on this kind of country, a ewe will have a really good feed source right there, and a lamb will have a really good shelter source right there. And so everything happens in a really close proximity, and basically we've done all we can to help that lamb survival and look after the ewe. The next thing, so we felt we were on the road a wee bit to the right fuel for the property, or the right fuel for the sheep. The next step was to have a look at these sheep and how they were producing. As Jason mentioned, I was lucky enough to get an exchange to South Africa for a month and to have a look around some marina properties, but also around quite a few other businesses there. And this, I didn't know at the time what a catalyst to change it would be. And I often get a wee bit emotional about it, because it actually caused our survival, and just in a sheer economic sense, and also realised that we had a whole lot more gas in the tank, I felt, at home in our ewe flock. These guys were quoting 130, 140% lambing, and we were doing sort of between 105 and 110. We did 112 one year in the mixed stage ewes, not the tudus, and I thought that was pretty good, and actually stacked up on the average, it was pretty good. But going over there, they're also talking about growth rates up to 350 grams a day, etc. One of the really high-powered systems in the Western Cape, they had a 5-star system, they called it, and they had a split flock, and they were lambing 3 times in 2 years and things like that. And it was just a wee bit mind-blowing how much was there. So anyway, on the return, one of the ladies I went with was Jane Riv, who was involved in the stud game over here, and some of you might know. And then when she also runs a stud 9 Mile at home, when we got back home, Jane said, "Give me a chance to type your ewes up, and I reckon I'll show you some potential." And so we typed them up into what we call the Royals and Generals, and then the Black Tigers, which go to a Romney. But anyway, this ewe standing in the foreground, showing herself off nicely, is pretty much what we tried to get down that line. Strip a bit of wool off, strip some skin off, and bear them up a wee bit round the head and around the front legs and things, but to get to this type of ewe with basically a better carcass type. The first year we did that and took them through, scanned them differently. The mixed stage, there wasn't a whole lot of difference, but their lamb survival was great. And so there was roughly about 10% better survival in those better type of ewes in the mixed stage. The tudus came as a real surprise, because they scanned 35% better. So with those couple of figures to look at, when we went through, we didn't have the lambing difference in the tudus because they were lambed together. We just didn't have the country to lamb them separately. But it didn't take much, you didn't have to be very sharp on a calculator to work out if all your ewes were like these Royals or these top-end ewes, how much better off you'd be. So that was a real graphic example of the potential that was there. So
following on from that, we thought, right, we better get, it's the old saying, you don't know what you don't know, so we needed to get measuring and monitoring what was happening around the property. We initially got some grazing exclusion cages made, put it around different parts of the property. We wanted to know what we were growing, when we were growing it, and also where were the best places to grow it. We were flying blind up until then, so to get a bit of a cost analysis on where we were going to put this extra feed in, we joined a vet-driven program called Stock Here. It's essentially it's a program. Gundy's sitting there with Pete Anderson, who's our vet, and it basically lays out, Gundy explains it, the whole farming year on the table, and we look at everything that happens through the year, and it's a program that enables us to set goals, production goals, and then in turn it puts the steps in place to achieve those. So and then with all the data that we're collecting, we sit down and we analyse it to make sure that whatever we're doing right.
It also really works really well in as much that you get it all, as Lisa said, it's pretty much like laying a year out on a table. Then we monitor the ewes at strategic times, set weight gains and weight goals, etc., and things like that. We've got a stock manager at home, and it brings them into play as well. So all 3 of us, or 4 of us actually, with Pete involved, sit around the table, so everyone knows the program. So you can actually drop one person out of that, and the others know what's going on, which I think is really, really important.
It's great. It's no longer just all in his head. We all know what's going on now, because I always said if something happened to him and he got lost up a gully, I still know how the operation's working. We weren't going to be landed in the shed. So the next stage we then got onto was an irrigation development. We were currently irrigating about 100 hectares of wild flood and old border dike system, and our irrigation right actually came up for renewal. We were looking down the barrel at a $2 million development, so we were crunching the numbers pretty flat out because obviously we already had taken on quite a big monkey with the mortgage of the farm, but we decided we couldn't forgo that irrigation right because that would have impacted on the capital value of the property, so we were committed. We didn't really have a choice. In that process it became really clear that our government and our communities are becoming more and more concerned, especially in New Zealand. I'm not totally aware with you guys here in New Zealand, in Australia, with our environmental footprint as farmers. And as you see in the background, we farm right beside a lake. So more and more finger pointing is happening to those of us that are farming beside these precious resources. So we made the call to move our irrigation 6 kilometres away from the lake. Luckily, we had the ability to do that, and ironically, it was closer to where our water was being sourced. But that came at a huge cost. And that process, it cost us over $200,000 through the regional council process to renew that irrigation right. I feel sorry for the buggers that had to get new stuff. And it took us over 15 years. And ironically, we've only got 10 years on that consent before it's up for renewal again. So we're getting really smart at recording everything so we're prepared for the next time that comes up. We also, during that number crunching, when we were working at how's the system going to pay, we didn't really want to go down the dairy route or any alternative type of operation. And the numbers kept coming back, stacking up that fast finishing of merino lambs was the way that we were going to do this. So the faster we could get them finished and off the place before the winter, so we didn't incur that wintering cost, was how this was going to work. So there was no pressure.
Yeah, so basically also on the irrigation front, we'd found that the legumes and the former lucerne had worked so well and given us such a gain on the dryland country, we just decided to adopt that going into the irrigation. And we've got one pivot as in lucerne with a bit of grass, and the other one's all straight red clover. So looking at the ewe flock, it's really basic stuff, but we just needed to get down there and find out what was affecting their performance, and obviously it's scanning. We needed to get more lambs in the belly for a start, and our tudus would really struggle to get the scanning up. We were around 110, 111, 112% around there, but man, we couldn't get them off the floor from that, which was so there was a big gain to be had there. And in the process, one of the interesting things was our foretooths were consistently scanning 20% less than the mixed age. The mixed age were up about 160%, which was pretty acceptable, we felt. But it said to me that we were doing something wrong with those tudus in the first year of their life, so we needed to up our game on that. Like a lot of people, the lamb wastage was too high, and this once again was predominantly highest in the tudus. And which all resulted in the lambing percentage too low. We needed to lift the lamb percentage, we need to get them on the ground alive, grow them fast, and get them away at a good weaning weight. Really simple stuff, but it helps to get it down and get some targets set. So how would we improve the overall scanning in the flock? And we had one guy tell us that he said, what do you think defines your conception rate? And I said, well, I suppose, ewes on a rising plane and all that, proving that I knew a bit about the sheep business. He goes, no, he said, it's weaning. I said, well, how do you figure that? He said, well, that's a condition you use her in at weaning will dictate how well they meet the ram the next time, which is, once again, really basic. But so now we lay a hand on every ewe after weaning, and anything that's sub-condition score 3, or basically just the lighter ewes, we pick them up, and what we're finding is it'd be no surprise that the twinners were often the ones who were lighter, and they were the greater returners, so we have to just pick them up. So real basics, really. Once we've got the ewes all up on a plane again, then we head them in, have a target weight, mating weight set. One of the other things we adopted was a no second chances policy, so any ewe that scanned dry was gone, but not only that, any ewe that lambed and lost would get down the road as well, and just to help lift it. Like I say, the foretooths had the poorest scanning results, so we needed to look after those tudus a lot better and do our job properly. And one of the things that we adopted too was an early weaning process. We used to wean at about 115 days, and now we're down to 75 days. But that's obviously given the ewes a longer recovery period. And it also destocks that real valuable pasture, especially when you're coming into the dry and you've got a 60 kilo ewe with a, possibly a 25 kilo lamb beside her of someone else's lamb, you know who's going to win the argument over getting that extra bit of tucker. It's not going to be the wee lamb. So overall, like I say, our scanning percentage in the Tudus is picked up now. We're really pleased it's come up to around that 150% mark. And the mixed stage hasn't lifted too much. But what has happened with looking after them a whole lot better, the conception band has tightened up a lot. The next one was the lamb wastage, and really getting to grips with what was causing our lamb deaths while they weren't surviving. And so this led to a bunch of autopsies, basically picking up a heap of dead lambs and autopsying them and going through them, which our vet did, which was actually a really interesting process. It's a bit like reading a book, seeing if they've walked, seeing if they've breathed, seeing if they've eaten, etc. And what it led to was basically 80% of our lambs were dying of starvation, mismothering and exposure, which really, the fact was they were too light and too feeble when they were born. And so we needed to address this, which was basically going to be addressed through their mother, which is stating the obvious, but all these processes are very obvious, but to go through them is really good to get your head clear about it. And also the best lamb survival blocks identified, and so we keep records of use in, use out, possible lambs that could be born and what the death rate is in those blocks, and that's helped us shuffle some blocks around, like traffic going through there and things like that, or exposure to weather has had a big influence too. And then get the lamb size, the mobs down, so we've done quite a bit of subdivision fencing as well. And this has led to the wastage. Really, once again, you can see that 2012-13 year is not quite a true reflection of how it is, because we simply had Tudus mixed up, and we kind of guesstimated we had the Tudus mixed in with mixed age use, but the 14-15 year is probably more a fairer reflection, and is effective because we lambed them all separately and have done ever since then to get a real handle on those Tudus and things. So they were up about that 30-odd%. The mixed age seemed relatively easy to get them down to 20, but hell of a hard to break the sub-20, so we're really working hard on that. But now with the Tudus coming down to 20-odd%, it's left to overall flock wastage of about 21%, which in turn is reflected through into the lambing percentage. And as Trumpy said, it's come up. In 2008, we had about 84% in the Tudus and 107% in the mixed stage use, and now this last year we're really wrapped to come up to the 138 in the mixed stage and the Tudus over 116, so with them cracking on. So once we get them on the ground, then how do we improve the growth rates? And it's just through, once again, legumes. It just comes through that message again, stronger and stronger legumes, 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 whether it's irrigated or dryland. And then the other factor in there that we've started using lately and utilising the brains of one of your guys from over here, Mark Ferguson, and educating us on the use of EBVs as well. And just another tool in the toolbox. We strongly use eye appraisal, etc. on selecting the rams, but just really going after that eye muscle and fat and the 100-day weight, so we're getting them rapidly growing because we want our lambs up and gone. And then just our management, prioritising those twin ewes and the rotational grazing. Instead of just leaving them set everywhere, we rotate around and just keep them up with the clovers on the hill anymore. We don't look to see when the tucker's gone, we look to see if the clovers are gone, and then move them on. And we'll tidy up that later on, the grasses, and also managing a feed transition once those lambs are weaned, so everything goes onto the beta tucker actually with mum at foot. And the least amount of time they have on that real high-powered red clover and things is about 10 days with mum at foot, more like 2 weeks, and then we just simply take the mother away. And this has led to our greater lamb performance. The growth rates have come up. They're still not startling if you compare them to crossbred, and one of the good things about the stock care program we're in, there's about 200 farms on it altogether. There's only 3 merino properties, and the rest are all crossbred. So we don't hide behind the fact that we're a merino, we're just another sheep. We happen to have a really good fleece and nice wool. But we want to start performing up with those crossbred boys, which are starting to knock on their door now. And so we're just under 300 grams of growth rate from birth to weaning. And you'll see our weaning weight has actually gone down a little bit, but that's because we were weaning, this taken from the start of this graph was 105 days, now we're down to 75. So this is working really well, and in that, like Lisa said, in about mid-January, we've got to get prepared for about nil growth because of that heat hitting. And so we get mum out of the way and preserve that real good tucker for the lamb. So she's done her job and she can carry on out of the way somewhere, and that lamb can carry on. We're really pleased. This year we've killed everything bar about 10% of the surplus lambs at 8 months of the oldest one. So we started at 7 months. We've just got the test results back from the wool off them. There's about 69 mils has come back, and they'll clip about 3 kilos of wool. The carcass weight they killed was 19.5 on average. And with the way this wool market's going, we just got an email last night and it's come back valued at about $21 greasy and then $18 greasy for a couple of different lines. So that's what the kicker is with the merino, stating the obvious. If we can get the carcasses going well, we've got this wool on top of it, which really puts the old icing on the cake. And this is just a ready-reckoner graph that we work on. Basically, it's how many tonne of lamb on hand have we got in mid-January, because we used to wean in mid-January, so that's now we just self-correct it and keep it carrying through at this time frame. But it's just a real quick back-of-fag packet way of having a look at things and seeing how all the stuff you've done adds up. What does it really add up to? And so it's the amount of product you got to put out the gate. And this we will add wool into this as well, but it's just a straight tonne of lamb on hand. You'll see there in about 2008 when we started at it, we had about 90 tonne of lamb, and now we have up to that 145 tonne, I think. So we have 55 extra tonne of lamb on hand out of about 600 extra ewes. So the farm overall, that's a hell of a good improvement, and you can bang a calculator in there if you put it in at about even about $3 a kilo live weight or $2.50, whatever you want to use. It just gives you a pretty ready reckoner of how much extra product we've got on hand to sell.
So that's a real quick sum up of our wee journey over the last 13, 14 years. It has been a bit whirlwind and at times a bit gut-wrenching, but we've been determined to make it work. When we first took over the place, our accountant at the time told us it's not going to work with your debt loading and with your current income, and to start looking for a lifestyle block down the road and get ready for sale. And we looked at each other and we're both kind of on the mindset that when someone tells you you can't do something, it's a bit of but we salute. We'd
like to think we weren't like that, the picture with the ostrich with its head in the sand ignoring it, would possibly came out swinging a wee bit, but possibly good swinging every now and again. There is a time to fight, I believe. And so we decided to come up swinging, really.
Yeah. So Charlie asked us, actually, well, that's all great, but whereabouts are you going to now? And we thought we ticked quite a few boxes and got over a few fights as such, but now we've just got a few more on the horizon. And our biggest thing that's been hitting us lately in New Zealand is our government has now introduced a national policy statement on water quality. So now we farm under a nutrient cap. We now have a maximum amount of nitrogen and phosphate that we're allowed to emit from the property, and under current or traditional farming systems, for a lot of people, they feel that that's it. They're not allowed to run another animal on the property. And so for future succession planning, it's obviously causing quite a bit of disharmony. But we've looked at it in another way, and it's just meant we've got to farm smarter to keep this business profitable going forward. So one of the bonuses that we didn't foresee when we started down this journey was the fast finishing of merinos. They're all got, 90%, as Gundy touched on, are gone leading into the winter, and we're judged with the regional councils as to our wintering stock numbers at the beginning of July. So by default, actually 90% of our lambs almost don't exist. They're in and out of the system, and we're not even judged. So ironically, compared to when we started this journey, even though our stocking rate has gone up, the stock numbers we've gone up, what we give to regional councils is less than what we started. So we're ticking the environmental boxes now. They're not running. we're not carrying them over those months when you have the most nitrate leaching, when we have zero growth. We're also we all have to have farm environmental plans, so we now have to prove what we're doing. It's not just a feel good and we tell someone coming up the drive that we're doing this and doing that. We actually farm, we have a proper document that is live, and we can, what's that? Yeah, oh, yeah. Waiting on you. And we also are getting more and more pressure from consumers and our regional authorities and the community on the use of our precious resources. We live beside a lake, we have a water consent, so we're having to get more, we have to prove that what we're using it efficiently and we're using it in a sustainable manner. Got mentioned last night, I heard about farm audit processes or farm assurance programs. Ours are about to take another leap even higher. We've now got to prove that we're sustainable and ethical, our social, how we interact with our communities. We have to take photo evidence of what we're doing on farm and how we're improving it. Can't just say we're going to fence a waterway off. We actually have to give time commitments now. That's about to hit a lot of farmers. They're not aware of it. But if you say you're going to fence a river off, they will come back in the time frame that you've stipulated you'll do it, and you have to provide evidence. And we're embracing technology more and more. We are a demonstration farm for a fertiliser co-op with using precision aerial application, primarily because we live beside a lake, and using Farm IQ and EID. You might want to describe.
No, we don't have time, unfortunately. Jason's looking at us, and we've just got a quick... Do you want to click on that next thing? And I don't know, we might even turn the sound down, or else, if we've got time, this will just run just a couple of minutes. Thought we'd give you a bit of an invite home and just show you a couple of pictures.
Can we drop the audio but run the pictures? Okay, so enjoy the slideshow, and thank you very much. That was an awesome story. I'm not sure where the mic runners are down the back. I'm sure we'd have some questions, no doubt, from the audience. So Peter Hanrahan up the front, I reckon you've earned the right to ask a question. I'm probably only going to take 3, so that's about all we've got time for, and keep your answers pretty sharp. I like the analogy about, what did you say, on the back of the fag box? We don't talk about fags over here too much anymore. Hannah's.
Thank you, that was fantastic. But probably the thing that you didn't touch on, which was the most important, people, how have you changed? What have you done? Because you've done some magnificent things, you've got a very open mind about it, but how have you changed over that time?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. One of the things I'd like to think, we haven't been too precious for have people to actually admit maybe we're not getting something right. We've also been pretty ready at trying to seek out experts in their field and ask their advice, not be too shy to ask for advice. And also, like Anna said, about being adaptive and quick to change. I think I was talking to Lisa this morning about a rugby team. They used to be huge props, and then your fast little wingers and things like that. Now they're all about the same buddy size, and they're all sprinting around like Linford Christie. I think we pretty much have to be like that, fast and flexible, not afraid to reflect and not afraid to change, but not for change's sake, to do knowledge-based change.
Okay, next question, Ken Solly.
Yeah, Gundy and Lisa, this time last year, a group of Besswell people were freezing their ears off up on your top country, and I'm ever so pleased that you actually decided to speak both as a team today, because that's what we come away from your farm, the importance of teamwork. Your hospitality, Lisa, in ushering us all into your lounge room and looking after us in that cold weather was fantastic. Your sheep performance is stuck in our mind, and the reclaimed country that you did for irrigation was fantastic. I've got just a little tongue-in-cheek question, which actually emanated from Mark Ferguson, which said, he said, well, Gundy was always short of feed, so he thought he better marry an agronomist. Is there any truth in that?
You could answer that.
Yeah, probably. I think I've been pretty lucky, and Lisa, she's got a Bachelor of Agricultural Science and did her honours as well, so she's got a really strong technical background and knowledge, and we do work as a team very much, but we probably come at things a little bit different. I haven't been overly educated, but possibly been reasonably educated out in the field, so my point of view is from the stock side of things and that sort of thing, and Lisa, especially of late, because she's mixed up in some panels with the environment in mind, so we have to blend both stock performance, but if you can couple that with less environmental footprint, then you start kicking some goals. And one of the initial things actually which I didn't touch on with South Africa, I convinced me when I came back from there we need to sell the lamb store just to get some leeway in the system, and that was the initial destock that gave us the room to gather a little bit of tucker ahead of us and then start building, but building with that feed in front of us. But the agronomy part of it is extremely helpful in her contacts.
All right, I think we might draw it to a close there. I can't see any other burning questions. So if we could give a big warm round of applause to Gundy and Lisa Anderson.
Authorised by Victorian Government, 1 Treasury Place, Melbourne.